Hello everyone! I am Alice of KHR Arts and Cloud Orchid Publishing, and today I am going to read Chapter 1 of my latest novel, Succumb to Darkness. Chapter 1. Evanangela hid her face in her hands as her wings disintegrated. The feathers turned from their glorious silver splendor to gray, then to black, then to ash, the flames consuming them as she fell. Her eyes changed from colorless to cobalt, then to cherry. Her teeth grew and sharpened until they were serrated and hung low like ivory thorns. The fallen angel clutched her chest as her inner light went out and was replaced with cold darkness. She screamed as her heart blackened and the clear holy blood darkened. Red tears flowed down her cheeks, leaving her veins empty. When her virgin feet touched the earth, she slumped into a heap. Her leg muscles were weak as she was used to flying, never having walked. The solid ground was foreign compared to the shifting clouds and winds she was used to frolicking through. Her bare hands skimmed the cool grass. She flinched at the sensation, her mind racing to process all the new feelings that flooded her body. Evanangela turned and saw the setting sun. My last sunset. How I wish I could fly once more and burn in it. She watched in quiet remorse as the sun disappeared below the treetops. A breeze rustled her tunic gown. She shivered. The warm, feathery weight of her wings had always insulated her against the wind. Now she felt naked, her body light and exposed. Evanangela reached back and brushed her empty shoulder blades. They were solid and smooth. My beautiful wings! I know it to be true that Dia is righteous and just, but this is simply too much. She sank to her knees, bowing her head as she cried, but no tears came. Her eyes burned from the lack of release, and her face was flushed. Evanangela sat back on her heels. The sky was dark now, and she could see the bare plains as she never had from above. Silver mists in the shape of humans floated about through the grass. Had Evanangela still been an angel, she would have ushered these lost souls to peace, but her new dead heart could not hear their pleas. Monseigneur Dieu, why have you forsaken these souls? Are they damned as I have been? She watched the mists writhe and shift until she was startled by the sound of footsteps. A shiver ran down her spine. The scent of living flesh was near, and her veins contracted with desire. Evanangela clutched the long grass, willing herself to stay and erase the thoughts of killing. Her heart burned to release tears, but her eyes could find none. The sticky residue of her bloody tears was drying in streaks down her cheeks, making her look a fearsome banshee or forest demon. The human's footsteps thundered as he approached. Evanangela cringed. Her skull ached from the noise. The fool! He is tramping so loud all of France must be able to hear him blundering through these fields. Reason slowly dripped away as her breathing became shallow. His scent was on the wind, faint, but it rolled over her tongue, igniting her instinct to hunt. She traced the sound, her body tense, ready to strike once the traveler was in range. The hunger took over, driving her muscles to spring. Evanangela ran without stealth or grace and tackled the lost traveler. Crimson eyes were bright with the madness of the feed as she threw her jaws open, exposing the glinting fangs. Oh, Seigneur Dieu, sauvez-moi! He covered his eyes, trembling and screaming. Evanangela froze. The fire in her eyes extinguished, and she released her grip. Seigneur, she whispered. The man took advantage of her confusion and pushed Evanangela away. She sat there, staring at nothing, while the traveler ran back down the dirt path, taking his tantalizing scent with him. The desire for blood escaped to the back of her mind, for now. A demon! Dieu, save us from the demon! The traveler's cries were becoming faint as he reached a farmer's fence line. What am I to do? To live this half-life I must kill. To kill is to die, and to die is to never return to whom I once was. Evanangela grabbed her hair, shaking her head and prostrating herself on the grass, screaming, Why must it be this way? La bête était là-bas! It was the traveler again. His footsteps were becoming louder as he approached. His scent wafted toward Evanangela on the cool night breeze. She swallowed, her mouth dry as she tasted the air. The thirst for blood cleared her mind of all else. She crouched in the tall grass and listened. Her skin bristled with anticipation. The frantic footfalls of the traveler were drawing near again, but there was another lighter pair as well. Evanangela strained her ears. Oui, je sais. J'ai entendu la bête ailier de l'église. This voice was new. Evanangela held her breath. A familiar thought struck her, flooding her with shame. A church? No, not a priest. He cannot see me this way. Vite, avant de partir! The traveler's voice was closer now, as was the priest. Evanangela could hear the swish of his robes in the grass. She could not allow a priest to see her this way, scuffling about like a beast on the hunt. What would Seigneur think? Evanangela scanned her surroundings. Open fields, nowhere to hide and forever to run. The traveler and the priest came into view. She poised to flee, but something crossed her path, flitting before her eyes. It slowed, and she recognized it to be a vampiress. Her luminous skin was far too pale and well-kept for a villager. The gleam in her eyes was otherworldly, the motion of her elegant limbs far too quick and precise for a mere mortal. The vampiress crouched before Evanangela in the grass and cocked her head to one side, her platinum blonde hair sliding from behind her ear like a spray of fallen stars. Salut. Evanangela wrinkled her nose. Beneath the expensive perfume of a noblewoman was the stench of death. It was true what Michael had said about these foul, cursed creatures. They roamed in packs like wild dogs, always tied to one another. Find one, and you'll find a whole nest of them nearby. Vermin. Her dead heart clenched as another wave of shame overtook her, making her gasp. Why, Michael? Why, dear? Why would you damn me to be this twisted thing? To become what you despise? What is a cursed thing like you doing here where there are priests about? Her acid tongue flicked the insult at the vampiress to ease the pain of her inner turmoil. Can you hear yourself? The vampiress laughed. She twisted a lock of Evanangela's hair between her fingers, but Evanangela flinched away. What a smug little mortal you must have been. At least I know my place, Evanangela hissed, and soon that priest will send us both to deliverance. The vampiress laughed, tossing her hair. She stood up and brushed the grass from her skirts. How very silly. You think a mortal priest can harm me? Still, you are right. It would be unwise to stay here. Evanangela twitched as the priest's muttering became louder. He was chanting a psalm. What had once brought Evanangela comfort now burned her ears, making them ring. I came to see what all the screaming was about, and wanted to see if there would be some left for me. She raked her eyes over Evanangela. And yet, you have no stains. Have you not fed? The humming was growing louder, and the psalm was making Evanangela's head ache. The vampiress cringed at the sound, her body swaying as if she could not bear to stand still. Evanangela plucked at the grass, her eyes downcast. Her senses warred as the human scent wafted in the air, growing stronger by the minute. I was the one screaming. The vampiress raised an eyebrow, then flinched. Evanangela could hear the loud swishing as the priest ran through the grass with the traveler close behind. She grabbed Evanangela's hand. Her grip was firm, and her skin was cold, sending shivers down her spine. Time to go! Evanangela looked over her shoulder, the scenery blurring as they ran faster than any human. The priest pulled a gold crucifix from his robes. It glinted in the moonlight. She shuddered. The sight of the cross sent a wave of animalistic terror and rage through her mind. The vampiress jerked to a stop. Evanangela faltered and caught herself by grabbing hold of her shoulder. She saw a strange tattoo behind the vampiress's ear, a sword with briars twined round the blade. A large black and purple carriage stood before them. Enormous black war horses stamped the ground as they stood at attention. Great purple plumes adorned their black bridles. A footman jumped down from the back of the carriage and opened the door. Holding out his hand, the vampiress took it and turned to Evanangela. Well, aren't you coming? She gaped at the carriage, shaking her head. What is all this? Where are we? The vampire shrugged and let go of the footman's hand. Does it matter? You clearly do not have a place to call home. Why else would a newly born be flailing about, screaming in a field? She tapped her chin. It is a mystery. Why would your sire leave you in such an odd place? A sire? Evanangela darted her eyes about. She could no longer hear the priest, but the mortal scent of the footman danced about her nostrils. She licked her fangs. Their serrated edges snapped her back, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Get in! The vampiress rolled her eyes and snatched up Evanangela's hand, shoving her at the footman. Verseau is expecting me to bring news of the Moors, and instead, I have found a new toy for him. Evanangela squeaked as she was bundled into the carriage, and the vampiress got in beside her. The footman shut the door, and the heavy clop of the horse's hooves punctuated the rattle of the carriage as they drove over the dirt road pitted by dried mud. What are you wearing? The vampiress plucked the sleeve of Evanangela's robe. It had been singed from the fall. It is all I have. Evanangela hugged herself. She noticed the smell of burnt fabric and feathers. Her eyes widened, and she looked out the window, hoping the vampiress would not suspect what she truly was. Were you tossed in a fire? Is that what happened to you? The vampiress hissed and shook her head. Those wretched peasants. They always make a holiday out of finding a vampire whenever they can. I suppose they dressed you in those ridiculous rags as part of their game? No matter. We'll get you properly dressed. Groan of the iron gates opening startled Evanangela. She straightened up and gasped when she saw the looming chateau from out the window. A long stretch of fine cobble road melted into a flat stone boulevard. Dark trees with luminous flowers flanked the road, leading the eye to the yawning doorway of ancient oak, varnished to perfection. Finally! Àmichemin snapped as the carriage door flew open, and she took the footman's hand. Evanangela followed her. The footman bowed his head as her unshod feet touched the cold stone. She shivered. Her mind reeled at all the new sensations bombarding her. The hardness of the stone, the scent of the night flowers mingling with that of mortal blood. Her thoughts were shattered when the vampiress pushed Evanangela toward the doors. Now just pretend you know what you're doing, or else I'll be endlessly badgered for bringing you here. Where exactly is here? Evanangela studied the crest carved in the heavy wooden doors. A stag and briars. C'est le Château d'Ostieux, and it has been the home of the Lacore for many generations. The vampiress gave a dramatic sweep of her hand. Evanangela gasped. Do you mean to tell me that a vampire lord lives here? Yes, and a grand vampire lord he is. The vampiress knocked on the doors. Our seigneur rules this court and the neighboring lands. You will be meeting him very soon. Evanangela balked at that. She was being led straight into a vampire nest. She looked over her shoulder down the avenue again. It was impossible to see past the tree line in the dead of night. But a chateau meant there had to be a village nearby. What a misfortune to have a vampire for their lord! And the villagers approve of a vampire lord. Àmichemin laughed a deep, throaty laugh. Oh, you are funny. Goodness, no, those idiot peasants haven't the faintest idea. Her demeanor grew stony, and her gaze cut through Evanangela. And it shall always stay that way, lest they come to kill us. The door swung open without a breath of noise, revealing a cavernous hall. Inside was lit by indigo candles mounted on the walls, with cobalt flames licking their blackened wicks. Centuries of cleaning had polished the stone walls, so they were unnaturally bright and smooth. An attendant bowed near one of the doors. Mademoiselle Àmichemin et Mademoiselle Evanangela, she muttered, not taking her eyes off the drapery that hung from the walls. Long tapestries depicting moonlit picnics and hunting wildlife in the forest were hung from the vaulted ceiling and nearly touched the stone floor. The scent of his living flesh ignited the animalistic fire in her once again. Evanangela turned her gaze on the attendant. Her muscles coiled as she took a sharp inhale. Àmichemin squeezed her hand hard enough to make the bones bend. Evanangela winced, her thoughts returning from the haze. Àmichemin released her grip. We do not hunt The attendants. The playful lilt of her voice was replaced with a low growl. Evanangela nodded, darting her eyes to the floor. I'm sorry. He nodded. Je m'excuse, Mademoiselle Evanangela. Les autres sont dans le salon. The attendant closed the heavy doors. Music from a harpsichord wafted into the hallway. Merci, garçon, Àmichemin responded as she led Evanangela further into the chateau. Her head was on a swivel as they walked. There were portraits of what must have been the original owners of the chateau and their families. The people in the paintings became paler further down the hall. Soft, rosy faces became replaced with severe alabaster. Tiny points between their lips revealed they were not human. Lovely, aren't they? Almost as old as the chateau itself. Àmichemin gestured to one of the portraits. She nodded as she studied a tapestry depicting a woman riding a black stag surrounded by red roses and briars. All the beauty of the chateau at once seemed ghoulish. The unnerving portraits were a foul reminder of what human greed could lead to. She glared at Àmichemin. But have you no shame? Living in such splendor as a damned creature? Lords are meant to be anointed by Dieu. You are an affront to Dieu. Àmichemin whirled about and grabbed Evanangela by the shoulders. Her nails dug into Evanangela's skin, and the air in the hall at once seemed cold as a winter's morn. Do not speak to me as if you were a sharp-tongued nun. I saved you from those beastly villagers. You are a damned creature, as we all are. All of France is ruled by us. Do not forget your place, lest I remind you, by tossing you out at sunrise and allow your twisted prayers to fall on deaf ears as you burn. Mademoiselle Àmichemin, you had us worried. Evanangela froze as a figure approached from the end of the hall. Àmichemin released Evanangela and turned to face the man. She gave a shallow curtsy. He was handsome and well-dressed. His red jacket showcased polished gold buttons. His eyes drew Evanangela in, his hawk-like gaze snaring her like prey. A smile crept across his face, revealing blood-tinged fangs. Something stirred within her as she beheld his beautiful visage. Though she was staring at the leader in a den of the damned, her dead heart clenched and her hands shook. She found herself frozen to the spot, and all at once she felt the foolish desire for him to touch her. Evanangela clenched her hands at her sides and swallowed as she fought not to grin like a fool. Bonjour, mademoiselle. Qui êtes-vous? His yellow-green eyes flitted to Evanangela's mouth. Power emanated from him, and his presence was overwhelming up close. She bowed her head, hoping he would not see the nervous trembling in her limbs. My name is Evanangela. Enchantée. He bent his head to kiss her hand, and in doing so, grazed her skin with his fangs. His scent wafted up to her. It was faint, but had a rich musk that had her licking the roof of her mouth. The blood had made him temporarily alive once more, the most devious trick of vampires. Mademoiselle Evanangela, I am Seigneur Verseau. Her veins were cramping, and she felt dizzy, but she managed a smile and a rough bob curtsy. Merci, Seigneur Verseau. What news from the moors, Àmichemin? She shrugged and flipped her hair over her shoulder. Dreadful news. The plague has already reached the Low Country. The plan to bring in outside mortals would require far further travel. Ships, possibly. Verseau scoffed. That won't do. Àmichemin pulled a rolled parchment from her dress pocket. It bore the black and gold wax seal of the court she had visited. She slapped it into Verseau's hand. Here's the latest report, though it won't tell you much different. He sighed and handed it back to Àmichemin. Hold on to this for me, won't you? We can discuss this later. He turned his gaze to Evanangela and smiled wide, flashing his fangs as he spoke. Please tell me, Àmichemin, will this ebony star be gracing us with her ashen company for long? Àmichemin relaxed. That is actually what I need to discuss with you. I found her a little too near to the churchyard. Verseau winced, but Àmichemin continued. She was just born when I found her, and the peasants seemed to have burned her. Verseau tutted his tongue. That won't do. And she stinks of a pyre. Get her properly dressed. Voices echoed from down the hall, giggling and boisterous chatter. Evanangela could see figures milling about. and talking to one another. They too wore fashionable clothing and hairstyles. Their jewels sparkled in the candlelight, and their hair was piled high in complex braids or ringlets of curls. Only Àmichemin wore her hair down, and it on its own was a sight to behold. Evanangela touched her short auburn locks. They had been permanently shorn before her fall, adding to the great punishment for her deep vanity. Her hands flew back down to her sides as shame flooded her once more, and her tears burned, begging for release. She pushed back the pain. I must not cry. I must bear it. This is my penance. He nodded and placed his hand on Evanangela's cheek, startling her from her thoughts. His palm was soft, but his nails tickled her skin as he petted her. May I? I beg your pardon. Her nerves made her heart flutter, causing her to gasp as it clenched like a hard knot. Her veins contracted, reminding her that they were empty. Verseau hooked his finger under her top lip and forced her jaw open, revealing her fangs. Evanangela froze, unsure of whether to feel insulted or flattered. He frowned, let go of her mouth, and looked up at Àmichemin. She hasn't a healthy gleam to her teeth. Àmichemin put her hand on Evanangela's shoulder and traced a finger down the side of Evanangela's face. When I found her, she seemed apprehensive. I understand. A churchyard is not the most appetizing place to hunt. Verseau nodded. He looked back down at Evanangela, his expression a mix of amusement and curiosity. She fidgeted with the cool, bloodless sapphire blush of a vampire vixen. I just wasn't given the chance. What a lovely little creature, he whispered and patted Evanangela's hand. The warm weight of his hand should have disgusted her, but instead it was an odd comfort. Ma chérie, allow me to arrange a private feeding for you, so you need not feel uncomfortable. His eyes gleamed as he allowed her hand to slip from his grasp. Evanangela squeezed her hands to stop their shaking. That is very generous of you, Seigneur. However, I would not want such an important entity as yourself to waste your time having to look after me. He put his arm around her waist. Nonsense! I would enjoy dining with you. Jacques! Another attendant appeared by his side, startling Evanangela. He wore the same silver gray as the door attendant, with the same crest pinned to his lapel. However, his pin was gold instead of iron. Verseau nodded. Jacques, arrange a feed for Mademoiselle Evanangela in the study. He bowed. Oui, Seigneur, and then disappeared back down the hall. Excusez-moi, s'il vous plaît, Mademoiselle Àmichemin. He kissed her hand, lingering as he scraped his fangs. His arm snaked behind Evanangela's shoulders and drew her in to his side. I shall attend to our guest. I apologize for keeping you. Indulge yourself. La valse noire is underway. There should be plenty left for you. Àmichemin withdrew her hand with a smirk on her face. Merci, Verseau. It has been a pleasure speaking with you, as always. May I have a moment with Evanangela before I depart? Verseau released Evanangela, sidestepped, and gave a shallow bow. Àmichemin took Evanangela's hand and led her out of earshot. I'm impressed. I have never seen him act this way. Àmichemin looked to ensure Verseau was out of sight and too far to hear. He usually dislikes those recently turned. It seems he has taken notice of you. Evanangela raised her eyebrows. She looked down the hall, then back at Àmichemin. Are you saying that Seigneur Verseau was flirting with me? She laughed. I dare say he is. I must go now before I miss the feed. Now, enough with this nun nonsense. Act like the vampire you are, and you shall be in safe hands. He is le Seigneur. He holds your very life in his hands. Be grateful. Àmichemin kissed Evanangela on both cheeks, then ran into the ballroom, her heels clicking on the marble floor. All right, y'all, I want to thank y'all so much for listening to this reading today. I hope that you enjoy Succumb to Darkness. It is my 6th novel. It was released on May 12th, and I'm just so excited that this is finally a book, y'all. So I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give it a like. And if you're new, subscribe. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.